This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. After experiencing trauma, I went to therapy, and my therapist guided me through a difficult time in my life. They helped me understand what was happening and provided me with tools to cope and find my own strength and resilience. Their experience and compassion were invaluable and enabled me to rebuild my life and move forward. I strongly believe in the power of therapy to help people through difficult times. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/resilience. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/resilience or choose podcast, then notes on resilience during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month.
Step one is knowing what you want to advocate for. And I think we all have very broad visions of what we want as advocates, but identifying tangible things that you want to happen within your community, right? And then determining who it is that you have to work with to get that done.
Hello, and welcome to Notes on Resilience. I'm your host, Maryann Chelinsky, and today we have another episode in our Advocating for Resilience series where I speak with Maryann McEvoy. She's the Executive Director of the Office of Advocacy and Reform and Child Advocate for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and she is on the Executive Steering Council of HEAL PA, which is a coalition within Pennsylvania working to implement their trauma-informed PA plan. And we had a wonderful conversation about her role in the government and how advocacy takes a village, whether your role is in the government or you're an independent advocate. I think you're really going to learn a lot in this conversation. I know I did. Maryann, thanks for being here today. I'm so excited that we've gotten you on as a guest.
Me too. I've been excited to join you. The day has finally come.
I know it has, and our listeners are going to be glad that it has. And before we dive into advocacy and all of the great work that you're doing, the question I start for everyone is, if you could have dinner with a historical figure, who would it be and why?
Okay, so I've actually been asked this question before, which is why I know exactly who I want to say. And it might seem a little bizarre, but as you guys get to know me, it'll make more sense through the podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with Sarah Good, but Sarah Good was one of the first women to be executed in the Salem witch trials.
Oh, okay.
I would love to hear her story from her perspective and how she was treated by her community and what that felt like. And she was very outspoken. She was very much an advocate. So I'm curious to know. There are so many questions I would have for her and how she navigated just living in those times. And maybe if we spoke in an afterlife, if that exists, how did she feel looking back at everything she experienced? What would she have done differently, or what did she wish her community did differently?
Wow. That's a great one. I love that. And like I say with all of my guests, I wish I could be there, wish I could make it happen and I could be there so that we could learn this. But I love your question that you're thinking of, how does she feel about how she was treated by her community? And I think that gets at the heart of what you and I are going to be talking about and your advocacy work. And you have I think, a pretty high-powered job as executive director of the Office of Advocacy and Reform and then child advocate for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That sounds like really serious work.
I take it very seriously. I certainly do. I think coming into the position, when anyone starts a new job, there's a lot of excitement and anticipation and feeling like, oh, we're gonna change the world, and that's good, because I believe in ways we do that no matter what job we're in, right? But I also think that sometimes when people hear that I'm in government, they think you have all the power to do all of this, right? And man, does it take a village, right? That expression is there for a reason. There's so many limitations to the power that we have, even if we are working within government. And I also think that it depends how we define power, right? Because there are times where, and I love my job, but there are times where I think back to when I was working directly in my communities and I felt maybe more powerful than I feel right now because I was directly working with people and seeing the change that I wanted to be creating. So it all lies in how we define that, right?
Yes, it does. And I think that's so interesting to think about because I feel that way too, thinking that, okay, you're in government, you are the one who's shaping the real change to the system, but maybe that isn't exactly true. Not you're not the only one. And maybe is it more difficult to be shaping change from within the system?
Well, you know what? I don't think it's more or less difficult. I think it's the difficulty is making sure that we're building networks of individuals who are collaborating to create a shared vision and a shared desire for change, right? That's where the power comes in. The power is in numbers. So we can want to do as much as we want to do at a state level without the support of our voters, without the support of the constituents all over Pennsylvania, we won't make a lot of movement, nor would we know what movement we need to make because we need to know what's happening in our communities and it looks the same across the state and what looks different and how do we properly address the concerns that our constituents are having.
And I appreciate your point, and it's something some of the other advocates have made in this series that it takes a village, and it is wonderful to be a person who has the energy and the desire to make the change, and that is necessary, but we can't do it as individuals, that we have to come together with others who are looking to make change as well.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that reminder. It's something just personally as an advocate, it's definitely something I need to remind myself. I can kind of start going in one direction because this is what I want to do and sort of have to realize, oh yeah, no, I need some help on this.
Yeah. Who are the key players that you need that have the ability to make certain changes?
Right. That's a very important piece. Before we dive more into your work and as an advocate, just would love to hear about your personal journey. What brought you to this kind of work and why is it so important to you?
So I think that to a point, I was just born this way. I was born with this fire to stand up for people who I felt were not standing up for themselves for whatever reason that may be. And my parents laugh when they tell stories of me as a little girl, but they're very much who I still am today when I listen to some of them. And then I remember, as I grew up, starting to understand more of the pain that was being experienced in the world and feeling like there has to be something I can do. What could I do to try to make things better? Specifically, I can remember a specific moment of seeing a news story on the television. It was Princess Diana was in Africa and she was providing some type of aid and programming to children. And I was asking my mom, I was very young, but I was asking my mom, what was she doing? Why didn't they have houses? Why didn't they have food? And just learning that this world was so much bigger than this little house that I was living in and wanting to catch and heal all of that pain in those little hands that I had, right? And then that really just continued to spark that, oh, I need to do something. I want to make some type of a positive change. I want to help people. And I found little ways to do that even as a child. Eventually, it continued to blossom. I became a special education teacher and I wanted to learn more about how to be a disabilities rights activist. And I had my own mental health struggles and a panic disorder. By the time I was 14, I was diagnosed with panic disorder. It was very debilitating for me, actually, until I got the right type of treatment and support that I needed. But part of that support that I received was a school psychologist connecting me with our special education program and saying, I think that you'd be a wonderful volunteer in this place. And I got to know the students, I got to know the teachers, and I found it felt like home. So early on in my career, I ended up being a special education teacher. I moved into kind of independent advocacy, I would call it. I was volunteering different summers in different countries. I went to Tanzania. I went to a number of different places and helped to build programs that were inclusive for children who had disabilities, whether they were physical or emotional disabilities.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then when I returned home, I decided I wanted to continue to learn more about how to develop programs that would support vulnerable people, not necessarily just individuals with disabilities, but women and children, because I really saw the difference in treatment for women and children in some of the marginalized countries that I was in. And I wanted to make a difference there. During that time, when I was getting my master's degree, I experienced my own trauma. I was in a very abusive relationship. It was physically abusive and sexually abusive. And I did not recognize that for some time because I was in a relationship. So I didn't really understand that sexual abuse was truly sexual abuse, was what it was, because it felt like that was my boyfriend. And it took a lot of time to learn and understanding trauma, because that was part of my core studies and all of that, to really propel me forward and wanting to advocate for all vulnerable populations and to make sure that people kind of came to this realization and this light bulb moment that I had on what is trauma, what does it look like, not just for people who work in the programs that I was working with, but also myself personally, because it didn't occur to me that I may have experienced my own trauma, right? So that just continued to spark that passion of wanting to heal pain and wanting to advocate for people who did not always have a seat at the table, right? So I continued through my master's program. I worked with the United Nations for some time, focusing on programs that prevented human trafficking, and eventually decided when my master's program was complete to move back to Pennsylvania. I started my family. I met my wonderful husband. I started my family. And that's what kind of brought me back to this more local focused advocacy, state focused advocacy.
Right. Wow. That
was a lot. A lot.
It's not a lot in that you took too long to tell your story. It's a lot in that you have done a lot of really good work. Even from childhood, you've been focused on this. It's so amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. And you are now in a position where you maybe can amplify that work and the voices that come to you to make change. And what are some ways that somebody who wants to be an advocate or who is an advocate and is looking for their village, what are some ways that they can collaborate with officials like yourself or the policymakers and to create meaningful change?
So I think that step one is knowing what you want to advocate for. And I think we all have very broad visions of what we want as advocates, but identifying tangible things that you want to happen within your community, right? And then determining who it is that you have to work with to get that done. So if there is a loophole in a law that you've been recognizing that's affecting you or people who you work with, and it needs to be filled, contacting your House representative or your senator and explaining to them the unintended consequence within that legislation that they may not even realize is there, right? So first, knowing specifically what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you'll have a number of specific things that you want to do that are going to fall under your umbrella of your vision and your mission, right, as an advocate. But when you identify the specific things you want to do, reach out to the people who can make that change and guide them in how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They need your expertise, right? And there are other things that can be done. I mean, maybe you are not of voting age yet, or I spoke about this really being part of who I was, even from my early childhood. And I remember in middle school, or it was middle school or it was early high school. I might have been a freshman in high school. I had learned about the human rights abuses that were happening in Myanmar. And I was so riled up over this, right? And I decided, I looked up and I recognized that there was one specific oil company, which I'm not going to mention right now, but there was one specific oil company that was really creating a lot of the human rights abuses that were occurring because they were digging for a new pipeline in that specific town. And I was like, well, everybody needs to know here not to get gas at this place. Now, I'm much older, so I realize we're talking oil companies. But, but at that point in life, I was like, we can't get gas here. We're not going to do that. I'm going to ride my bike. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And I decided I'm going to create a pamphlet that tells people what's happening in this other country. I'm going to have pictures of the people who are being affected and real data and information of what's happening. And then I'm also going to have bullet points of different things that they can do to avoid getting gas from this company, right?
I love it.
I printed this all out, and my father, God love him, helped me print everything, make sure it looked nice. I got it all folded up and I had all these pamphlets ready. And I went and I stood at that darn gas station and I just handed out pamphlets. And I just taught people. And a lot of people were like, oh, this is crazy. I didn't know that. Thank you, and moved on. Now, the owner of the gas station was not very happy with me. And he said, if you really want to make a difference, why don't you go to school and learn about how to do this stuff? And I said, well, I am going to do that. But for today, I'm right here. And I remember the police coming and being like, she's not doing anything wrong. She's not on your property. Like, she's just educating people. My brothers were so embarrassed because they were in a car and their friends were like, is that your sister? And they stopped.
Oh, you are a force to be reckoned with.
You can make a difference no matter what age you are, in big ways and in small ways, right? Just be true to who you are and don't be scared of confrontation, because like I said, if you're advocating for something, somebody's not going to be happy with you. That gas station manager was not thrilled with me on that day, but I was okay with that.
Right. I think that's an important reminder, and in fact, if somebody isn't upset about what you're doing, maybe you're not actually advocating for anything.
Yeah.
Or for change. Maybe you're not advocating for something to change because we don't like to make change. And you are part of something that I just love, the trauma-informed Pennsylvania plan. And then you're part of HEAL PA, which is that coalition to implement this trauma-informed culture, I guess, across the state.
Yeah.
And I'd love to learn a little bit more about that, because talk about a village and making change.
Yeah.
That is, I think, an amazing effort.
And I would still say we're in our infancy stages. I mean, we've been doing this for 5 years now, but there's still so much to do, because when we're talking about culture change, we're talking about really getting deep into our communities and not just changing regulatory processes, doing check the box type of work. We're talking about having ongoing conversations about chronic stress, and I like to say that over the word trauma, because trauma has become such a buzzword. And some people immediately say, I don't want to talk about this anymore, right?
Yeah.
Okay, then let's talk brain science and what trauma is. And it's chronic stress. And that looks different across populations, right? Our marginalized populations are experiencing trauma at levels that are far different, but having incredible impact on them physically and psychologically. But anybody can recognize the impact that chronic stress is having on them as an individual. We all experience it, right? We all experience it at some point. And sometimes it's as simple as you're in a very toxic work environment. Well, what happens when you're in a very toxic work environment and you come home to your children? You're screaming, you're stressed. You don't have you can't keep yourself calm to be able to deal with the complex problems that might arise in being a parent, right? There's a ripple effect there. You yell, they yell. You're creating, even think about not just coming home to children. Let's say you're just driving down the road. We talk about road rage all the time. That stems from chronic stress. People are driving and they're so amped up by the stress that they've been experiencing. How do we get people to take a breath and realize, okay, I need to practice my own well-being, my own healing. I need to take a breath, so that I'm not bleeding on people who didn't cut me.
Right. Well, I first read about trauma-informed PA a little while ago and a few years ago and decided that we need to have that here in Massachusetts. We need to have a trauma-informed MA. We might as well just copy the whole program. And I have been putting out feelers, trying to figure out what are we already doing and I would love to create this statewide framework like you guys have. So I'm just saying that right now on the podcast because I want people to know that's where I'm heading, and I'm reaching out to people to try to figure out how we can make that happen.
Oh yeah. Ours started within our governor's office, but other movements don't have to start at that high state level, right? At the end of the day, the most important work that we're doing is we're creating local coalitions in each of our counties. We have 67 counties. We have 44 local coalitions now.
Yeah.
And we're helping them build up, like, what resources do they provide? How often do they get together to talk about their processes and the procedures within their counties? How can different systems integrate their work so that they're promoting healing and preventing child abuse and child neglect, right? These are all the conversations that have to be had across all your communities. So there's a lot of coordination involved.
Yes.
And it helps to have a state level entity that can help convene those conversations. But man, it could be a nonprofit that has representation throughout the whole state.
Yes.
So
because I've started.
Let me know. I'd love to help.
Okay. Well, you heard it here first, folks. We're going to make this happen. But I have started to recognize, we have so many people on the ground who are doing such good work. And I've started to be identifying some of the groups that I can identify. And I realized, there are people doing this work. And so how do we kind of organize them and force multiply the work that they're doing, so people aren't duplicating effort when that's not necessary? And
what did we say earlier? There's power in numbers, right? So
there is. Yeah.
Getting everyone together and on the same page to move in the same direction is what it's all about.
Yes. And, you mentioned that HEAL PA and trauma-informed PA are kind of in their infancy, but how does it feel things are moving? Do you feel like you guys, are you seeing change?
Yeah, I mean, just sitting on a Zoom meeting and recognizing that we have the majority of our counties, there are teams in 44 of our 67 counties that are aligning with the work that we're doing, that are utilizing our resources, that are starting to get their hands dirty in changing the cultures within their counties or even the townships within their counties. That's extremely rewarding to see and to be a part of. I mean, they're doing the work in their communities, but just knowing that they have the backbone and the support system of this statewide entity really helps it's funny, it helps keep them moving, but it also helps keep us moving because we feel connected to them.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful thing.
Yes. Well, and it's back to what you started with, that it takes a village. And this is a way to kind of organize that village to all be moving in
the same direction,
a similar direction. Yeah.
Yeah.
So amazing.
Yeah.
So we are getting close to the end, but I, of course, want to talk to you for about 5 more hours. But one thing, I'd love to get your input on, how do you take care of yourself as an advocate? Because this work can be emotional and it can be difficult, and I know in some cases it's personal. So how do you maintain your health when you're doing this work?
I try to cut myself some slack every now and then. I think that the answer most people would expect to hear is like, I do yoga, I eat right, I do things, and I do. I love yoga. My husband would tell you, he's like, where are you? Probably at the yoga studio, because I don't know where you are. But the truth of the matter is, I'm going to give you an example. The past 2 weeks have been really hard emotional weeks for me as an advocate, because like we said before, if you're doing your job right, you're always going to be upsetting someone. It doesn't feel good to not be liked. Everybody wants to be liked by everyone, right?
Yeah.
You start to question yourself and you start to beat yourself up, even if you're Iron Man, and letting yourself be sad sometimes and letting yourself take a day to lay on the couch and eat cold Dominoes at 10 a.m. Like, it's okay. You're human. Do it, trade the high heels for some fuzzy socks and let yourself take a breather. And maybe that does look like going to yoga, but maybe it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it looks like eating a cupcake. Like, who cares? Let yourself do what your body is telling you to do in moderation, right? You're not going to do that every single day. You want to take care of your health and your well-being, but just listen to your heart and listen to your mind and your body and trust yourself, because you know what you need on the inside.
Yeah.
And then when you're ready, snap yourself out of it and remember that you're a boss and you're going to get stuff done.
Yeah.
Even though it feels like you're never going to be able to make the huge change you want to make, you're going to make a little change, and that's going to have a ripple effect.
That's such an important reminder. I think so many of us envision this really big change, and that's great. And that keeps us moving.
Yeah.
But we might not ever see that really big change.
Right.
But we'll see the little changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the most powerful things that I'll do in my life will have nothing to do with my job. I think it will be teaching my kids that they're loved unconditionally and how to love themselves unconditionally.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most powerful thing that we can sometimes do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Well, before we wrap up, I'm just curious, what is giving you hope right now?
What is giving me hope? The sunshine that keeps coming out every day. We are officially in spring, and man, did I need to make it to spring this year. I don't know if anybody else feels that way. Yeah, that's what gives me hope, is just knowing that tomorrow's always going to come, and there's going to be more opportunities to do great things.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's so great. Maryann, thank you so much for chatting with me today. And how can people reach you or learn more about the work that you're doing?
Oh, well, find me on LinkedIn for sure. If you're on LinkedIn, if you're not on LinkedIn, they can go to healpa.org. We have info@healpa.org is the email address. If they had any questions and wanted to reach out that way, they are more than welcome to do that. But yeah, I'm an open book. So if they want to connect on LinkedIn and see what I'm up to, I welcome that.
Oh, that sounds great. I'll put that info in the show notes to make it easier for people to find you.
Perfect.
Maryann, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I've been really looking forward to this conversation, and it did not disappoint.
Oh, thank you. It's been wonderful to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did. So if you'd like to learn more about me, Maryann Chilinsky, I work with organizations to help understand how to create environments where people can thrive after difficult life experiences. And I do this through talks and consulting. I'm a survivor of mass violence, and I use my experience to help leaders learn about resiliency, compassion, and trauma-sensitive leadership, to build strategies to enable teams to thrive and be engaged amidst difficulty and turmoil. If this is something you want to learn more about, visit my website, www.manyachilinsky.com, or email me at manya@manyachilinsky, or stop by my social media on LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks so much.